Art19 launches with new measurement technology, the London Podcrawl 2016, and how you can run the Rio Olympic Marathon.
Welcome to the Richard Daly Podcast, bringing you a UK perspective on the latest news and developments from the world of podcasting and internet radio.
Welcome to episode 13. A big thank you to Music Radio Creative and Robin Banks for the new show intro you just heard there. Let's start the show this week with a piece from Rain News about a San Francisco podcast hosting company called Art19. They've launched their new podcasting platform this week. Art19 has developed some proprietary technology to measure audiences and provide analytics to support advertising during podcast episodes. The main features of their new technology include dynamic ad insertion and ad targeting. Their audience measuring tools seem quite interesting and pretty ambitious, I think. They're aiming to capture information on listening behaviour from different places and pull the data together to give a picture of how shows are being consumed on different platforms. Now, as I've discussed before, this is seen as something that advertisers are demanding so that they can understand whether advertising in podcasts is going to give them value or not. Rain News quotes Art19's CEO, Sean Carr, who compares the state of podcasting data to streaming audio. He says, "In order to make podcasting a staple buy in the agency world, it is our belief that we have to deliver data on the level of streaming audio. Streaming audio data is phenomenal, perfect listening telemetry, frequently with the names of registered users and all kinds of demographic data. Now, when you compare that with the podcasting today, it's hard for buyers to make the case internally." That's a quote from Sean Carr, the CEO of Art19. Now, from my perspective, as another measurement initiative, Art19 are going to have to work really hard to get traction for this. But they have collected some really big partners, some good names, including Midroll. We've talked about them in recent episodes. Midroll, of course, on the podcast publishing side. And Ogilvy and Mather, a really big and long-established advertising agency. Some more metrics now. PodTrack have published their July 2016 rankings of the top 10 publishers from within their own client base. I will link to the ranking table in the show notes for this episode at richarddaly.com/13 and also on my dedicated metrics page, which you can find at richarddaly.com/podcast-statistics. In the top 10 rankings this month, NPR retained their spot at number 1 with a US unique monthly audience of nearly 8 million streams and downloads. And PodTracks say that their top 10 publishers, that's of course their own clients, generated 187.8 billion total global unique streams and downloads in the month of July, which was a 5% increase on the previous month. PodTrack's ranking chart has now been going for 4 months, so it's starting to see some data and some traction. As we've talked about before, the key issue here is that it is only their own clients that are being measured and reported in the top 10. I'm delighted to be able to report on a podcasting event that's happening in London later this month. That's Saturday the 20th of August. This is reported via the podcasternews.com website. Podcrawl 2016 combines a pub crawl with a podcasting meetup. The event is organised by Rowley Cutler of the Dark Compass podcast, and it's been running since around 2008. Podcaster News did a brief interview with Rowley on their website. I would love to attend this event, but unfortunately I do have another commitment that day. It does sound like a great event, so if you're in the London area, why not go along? They do have an event page on Facebook as well. Just search for Podcrawl London 2016. And if you do attend, please let me know how it went. An article from the Belfast Telegraph now. This is titled "Women Start to Make Their Voices Heard in Podcast World," written by Katie Wright for the Telegraph. The article describes how podcasting is opening up to more female hosts after a decade of male-dominated shows. The author of the article reports that listeners have gone from being 75% male to an almost even split of men and women, and that the percentage of female podcasters is also gradually increasing. She goes on to say that the current UK iTunes top 10 has shows with 8 male hosts and 3 female ones. I think that one of the shows has 2 hosts, which is why there are 11 in that list. Finally, an interesting statistic from the article. This comes from podcasting platform Acast, who state that they've seen the number of female podcasters increase by 200% in the last year. Now, I like this article. It's been written in a way that encourages female readers to try podcasting for themselves. So if that sounds like you, do go and check out the full article. Again, link in the show notes, richarddaly.com/13. Time now for my regular feature here on the podcast, where I talk a little about the podcast, or podcasts indeed, that I've added to my own listening feed this week. My recommendation for this week is, well, okay, I think it's a recommendation. Bear with me. Cheap Show is a UK-based podcast that describes itself as something between a studio-based chat show and an anarchic comedy. Now, to me, it seems more like a game show at times. I'd like to say I know what the show is about, but to be honest, I still haven't worked it out. But it is quite funny. It's also explicit, so avoid it if that's not your thing or if there are children about. Now, the first episode I listened to was a clip show containing pieces that didn't make the cut of final episodes, and it was really funny. Anyway, give it a go. It's like Marmite. I'm pretty sure you'll either love it or hate it. An intriguing item now that I found through the HotPod newsletter from Nick Quah of HotPod Media. Rio Run is an online app for smartphones that describes itself as an interactive podcast. Now, the idea is that it provides a virtual audio tour of Rio de Janeiro as you run or walk around the route of the Olympic marathon. Now, what you hear depends on how fast you run and how much of the course you complete. As you pass key points on the route, you'll hear stories about how Brazil prepared for the Olympics and information on some of the landmarks of Rio. There's also information on the strategy for running a marathon. Now, this sounds like a really cool idea. Now, you might think you have to be in Rio for this, but in fact it can be used anywhere with a bit of imagination. Anyway, to try this out, you need to go to riorun.theguardian.com on your phone. That would be a smartphone, of course. No download is required, and there are two ways to use Rio Run. You can either track your progress using your phone's GPS if you're running outdoors, and as I said, you don't need to be in Rio, or you can manually enter your speed if you're on a treadmill. In the modern spirit of gamification, and of course this is the Olympics we're talking about, the app will give you a chance to earn awards and compete with Guardian readers from around the world. Basically, you can earn badges as you pass landmarks and distance goals towards completing the marathon. Now, this is a clever concept, and I guess it's one that could easily be repeated for other cities, and I really hope it's a success. So where can you meet up with me? I will be at Jane Cridland's Next Radio conference on the 19th of September in London. Next Radio is a conference for people that make great audio with more than 20 sessions in one day with attendees from the BBC and commercial radio stations, independent production companies and podcasters. It's the UK's biggest radio conference and tickets are only $149 plus VAT, so it's pretty affordable for a one-day event. If you're attending, do let me know. Let's have a meet-up over coffee or perhaps during lunch. Tweet me at Richard Daly or email me at richard@richarddaly.com. Okay, so that's all from the Richard Daly podcast for this week. Short and sweet. If you visit my website at richarddaly.com, you'll find all my social media links, as well as the various ways you can subscribe to the show. The show notes for this episode are at richarddaly.com/13. Please send me your questions or comments, and if there is a topic you'd like me to cover, then tweet me. Thank you for listening, and I will see you on the next episode.